She thought her twins died in a Christmas Eve fire, but 6 years later at airport she sees. Imagine standing at an airport, surrounded by the hum of travelers and the buzz of holiday excitement, when suddenly your eyes lock onto two little faces that stop your heart cold. They look so familiar. Too familiar for Jane Matthews. This moment shattered 6 years of grief and despair in an instant. She had spent every Christmas since that fateful night believing her twin daughters were gone forever, victims of a devastating house fire. But now, as she stared across the bustling terminal, those same faces were staring back at her, alive and laughing like nothing had ever happened. How could this be? What dark secret lay behind their disappearance all those years ago? And what would Jane do next? Jane's story is one of unimaginable loss, resilience, and ultimately hope. It begins on a quiet Christmas Eve, 6 years earlier, when her world came crashing down, literally. Her Victorian home, filled with memories of her family and love for her newborn twins, Millie and Daphne, was engulfed in flames. The fire left nothing but ashes and unanswered questions. With no remains identifiable through DNA testing, authorities declared the twins dead. Jane was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life alone, haunted by guilt and sorrow. Yet deep inside, something never felt quite right about the tragedy. And something didn't add up. Fast forward to the present day, where Jane finds herself at Salt Lake City International Airport, accompanying her colleague Robert Nelson on a business trip. Life has been a blur of monotony since the fire. Work, routine, and endless visits to the empty lot where her home once stood. Selling that land was supposed to mark the beginning of closure, a way to finally let go of the past. But fate had other plans. As Jane watches two young girls play near the baggage claim area, her breath catches. Their laughter rings out like music. But it's not just their joy that captures her attention. It's how much they look like her daughters. Honey blonde hair, identical features. Even the way they move reminds her of herself as a child. Could it really be them? The woman standing nearby, watching over the girls with an air of elegance and authority, confirms Jane's worst fears. Or maybe her wildest hopes. It's Lucia Calloway, her former mother-in-law. Jane hasn't seen Lucia or her ex-husband Royce since the divorce. Long before the fire, seeing her here, with these girls, sends a chill down Jane's spine. Her mind races with impossible thoughts. Is it possible the twins survived? Did someone take them away from her? Or is this some cruel coincidence, meant to reopen old wounds? Every instinct tells her to confront Lucia, but fear holds her back. What if she's wrong? Worse yet, what if she's right? As Jane wrestles with doubt and disbelief, we're introduced to the complex web of relationships that define this story. There's Royce, Jane's estranged husband, whose privileged upbringing clashed with her working-class roots from the start. He filed for divorce while she was pregnant, leaving her to raise the twins alone. Then there's Lucia, who always disapproved of Jane, viewing her as unworthy of the Calloway name. These dynamics paint a picture of tension and resentment, hinting at deeper motives behind the fire. Was it truly an accident, or part of a sinister plan? Robert, Jane's colleague and confidant, becomes an unwitting ally in unraveling the mystery. His calm demeanor and steady support provide a grounding force as Jane grapples with emotions she thought she'd buried years ago. Together, they follow Lucia and the girls to a sprawling mansion outside the city, driven by a mix of desperation and determination. This journey takes them further into uncharted territory, both literally and emotionally. Each step brings Jane closer to answers, but also closer to danger. The tension reaches a breaking point when Jane discovers evidence that suggests the unthinkable. The twins may have been taken from her deliberately. A security guard's confession reveals a chilling conspiracy involving Royce and Lucia, who orchestrated the fire to fake the twins' deaths and erase Jane from their lives. The revelation leaves Jane reeling, torn between anger, betrayal, and overwhelming relief that her daughters are alive. But the fight isn't over yet. Legal battles loom ahead, and the road to rebuilding trust with her children will be long and fraught with challenges. Throughout this gripping tale, themes of maternal love, identity, and justice take center stage. Jane's unwavering devotion to her daughters drives every decision she makes, even when faced with, in seemingly insurmountable odds. The twins, now known as Evie and Castella, embody resilience, carrying fragments of their forgotten past in the form of cherished toys, a connection neither time nor deception could sever. Meanwhile, the stark contrast between Jane's humble beginnings and the opulent lifestyle imposed on her daughters highlights the class divide that fueled much of the conflict. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of this story is its exploration of healing and redemption. 6 years of grief transformed Jane into someone unsure of how to move forward. Now, confronted with the miracle of her daughter's survival, she must rediscover her strength, not just for herself, but for them. Will she find the courage to reclaim her role as a mother after years of absence? Can she navigate the complexities of parenting children who barely know her, while helping them process the truth about their past? These are the questions that hang in the balance, keeping viewers on edge as the narrative unfolds. And so, as Jane prepares to meet her daughters face to face for the first time in 6 years, the weight of the moment presses heavily on her shoulders. She clutches the tiny keychain bearing their baby pictures, a symbol of the bond that endured despite everything. Tears stream down her face as she steps into the room where they wait, curious and cautious, unsure of what comes next. "I'm Jane," she says softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your real mom." The twins exchange glances, their expressions unreadable. One of them speaks up hesitantly, asking the question that lingers in everyone's mind. "Can we see where you live?" Just as Jane begins to answer, the scene fades to black, leaving audiences eager to learn what happens next. Will the reunion bring healing, or will the scars of the past prove too deep to overcome? Stay tuned for the next chapter of this unforgettable journey, where love, truth, and family collide in ways no one saw coming. As Jane sat across from her daughters in the small cafeteria, watching them giggle over their ice cream sundaes, she couldn't help but marvel at how much of their personalities still shone through despite everything they'd been through. Evie, her Millie, was bold and curious, asking questions about Jane's life with an intensity that reminded her so much of herself at that age. Castella, Daphne, was quieter but equally observant, her big eyes taking in every detail as if trying to piece together a puzzle she didn't fully understand yet. They were alive, they were here, and somehow, against all odds, they were still her girls. But even as joy filled her heart, Jane couldn't ignore the storm brewing on the horizon. The police had assured her that Royce and Lucia would face justice. But this wasn't just about punishment for crimes committed 6 years ago. This was about rebuilding trust, unraveling lies, and helping 2 little girls who had grown up believing one reality, only to have it shattered overnight. Jane knew this road wouldn't be easy for any of them. As she listened to Evie chatter excitedly about flowers and gardens, Jane wondered how long it would take before the weight of their stolen years truly hit them. Would they resent her, hate her, or worse, would they feel torn between the life they'd known with Lucia and the new one Jane wanted to give them. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of legal proceedings, counseling sessions, and logistical planning. Jane stayed close to Evie and Castelfa, determined not to leave their sides unless absolutely necessary. Robert remained by her side, too, proving himself to be more than just a supportive friend. He was becoming a steady presence in her life when she needed it most. His quiet strength gave her courage during moments when doubt threatened to overwhelm her. "You're doing amazing," he told her one evening after a particularly emotional session with the twins. "They're lucky to have you." Jane smiled, weakly, wishing she could believe him completely. Meanwhile, the investigation into Royce and Lucia revealed layers of deception that shocked even the seasoned detectives working the case. It turned out that Lucia had orchestrated much of the plan, using her wealth and influence to cover their tracks. Birth certificates were forged, medical records falsified, and witnesses paid off to ensure no one questioned the existence of Evie and Castella. Royce, ever the entitled heir, went along with it, seeing the fire as a way to erase Jane from his daughters' lives entirely. He hadn't counted on Jane's resilience or the tiny threads of connection, like Mr. Buttons and Green Bear, that tied the twins to their real mother. Back at the hotel where they were staying temporarily, Jane found herself staring at those very bears late one night. She'd retrieved them from the mansion, along with a few other mementos belonging to the twins. Holding them now, she marveled at how something so small could carry such profound meaning. These toys weren't just reminders of her lost years. They were symbols of hope, proof that love endured, even in the darkest times. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered promises to herself and her daughters. "We'll get through this. I'll make sure of it." As the days passed, tensions began to rise within the group. While Evie seemed eager to embrace their newfound relationship with Jane, Castella grew increasingly withdrawn. One afternoon, while playing with some coloring books in the hotel suite, Castella suddenly burst into tears. "I want Grandma!" she cried, throwing her crayons across the room. Jane froze, unsure of what to do. Should she comfort her, reassure her, or respect her need to grieve for the woman who had raised her? Even if Lucia had done so under false pretenses, Robert stepped in gently, distracting Castella with the story until her sobs subsided. Later that evening, Jane confided in him about her fears. "What if I can't fix this? What if I fail them again?" "You won't," Robert said firmly. "No one expects perfection, Jane. Just honesty, love, patience. You've already given them more than they've had in years." The truth. Despite his reassurances, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Royce and Lucia's legal team was fighting tooth and nail to delay the custody hearings, arguing that removing the twins from their current environment would cause irreparable harm. Their argument struck a nerve with Jane, not because she doubted her ability to care for her daughters, but because she knew there was truth in them. Change was hard, especially for children. How could she balance protecting her girls with giving them space to process everything? Then came the day of the custody hearing, a moment Jane had both dreaded and anticipated since the airport encounter. Sitting in the sterile courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and reporters clamoring for details of the high-profile case, Jane felt like she was living someone else's life. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table, willing herself to stay calm. Across the aisle, Royce sat stone-faced beside his attorney, while Lucia dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, projecting the image of a grieving grandmother wrongfully accused. Jane's stomach churned with anger and disbelief. How dare they play the victim? The judge listened intently as evidence was presented. The security guard's confession, the forged documents, the DNA test results confirming Jane's maternity beyond a shadow of a doubt. When it was Jane's turn to speak, she stood slowly, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "Your Honor," she began, "6 years ago, I lost everything I held dear, my home, my daughters, my sense of self. But today, I stand before you, not as a victim, but as a mother who has fought every single day to find her children and bring them home. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I am ready to face them, to give my daughters the love, stability, and truth they deserve." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge nodded, signaling for the defense to respond. Royce's lawyer launched into a passionate argument about the twins' established life with Lucia, painting Jane as an outsider who couldn't possibly understand their needs. Jane clenched her fists beneath the table, forcing herself to breathe. She glanced at Evie and Costella, seated in the front row with a social worker, and saw the confusion etched on their faces. This wasn't fair to either of them. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the judge delivered his verdict. Temporary custody would be granted to Jane, pending a full psychological evaluation of the twins and additional hearings to determine permanent arrangements. Relief washed over Jane, but it was short-lived. Royce immediately filed an appeal, vowing to fight the decision. As they exited the courthouse, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, Jane tightened her grip on Evie and Costella's hands. "We're gonna be okay," she murmured, though she wasn't sure whom she was trying to convince, them or herself. That night, back at the hotel, Jane tucked the twins into bed, reading them a story about a brave little bird who learned to fly despite its fears. When she finished, Evie looked up at her, her expression serious. "Will we live with you forever now?" she asked softly. Jane hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I hope so, sweetheart, but we'll take it one day at a time, okay? No matter what happens, I'll always be your mom." As she turned off the light and closed the door behind her, Jane leaned against the wall, exhaling deeply. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she and her daughters could heal together. A future filled with laughter, love, and maybe even forgiveness. And yet, as she drifted off to sleep, Jane couldn't shake the nagging thought that Royce and Lucia wouldn't go down without a fight. What lengths would they go to in order to reclaim the girls? And how far was Jane willing to push back to keep her family safe? As Jane entered the cafeteria, her daughters' faces lit up with excitement. Evie waved enthusiastically, while Costella shyly held up a spoonful of chocolate ice cream. "We saved you some," Costella said, her voice soft but hopeful. Jane smiled through her tears, pulling up a chair to join them. For the first time in 6 years, she felt whole again. But she also knew this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments when the weight of their stolen years might feel unbearable. But as she sat there, laughing at Evie's animated storytelling and marveling at how much Costella reminded her of herself, Jane realized something important. They were together now, and that was enough. The next few days passed in a blur of court hearings, counseling sessions, and logistical planning. Royce and Lucia had been formally charged, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. The confessions from the security guards sealed their fate, leaving no room for denial or manipulation. Jane listened quietly as the judge granted her temporary custody of the twins, pending a full restoration of her parental rights. It was a victory, but it didn't bring her satisfaction, just relief that her daughters were finally safe. When the hearing ended, Jane turned to Robert, who stood by her side once more. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. He simply nodded, his presence speaking louder than words ever could. Back at the hotel, Jane sat with Evie and Costella, helping them pack their belongings. The girls had brought dozens of outfits, toys, and books, most of which were gifts from Lucia. Jane encouraged them to take whatever they wanted, knowing it would help ease the transition. As they folded clothes into suitcases, Evie suddenly stopped and looked up at Jane. "Will Grandma come visit us?" she asked hesitantly. Jane froze, unsure of how to answer. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to burden her daughters with the harsh reality of what Lucia and Royce had done. Finally, she settled on the truth. In simple terms, "Grandma made some bad choices," Jane explained gently. "She thought she was doing what was best for you, but she hurt a lot of people along the way. We'll talk about it more later, okay? Right now, let's focus on starting our new life together." By the time they boarded the plane back to Denver, Jane felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: joy, fear, hope, and uncertainty. The twins seemed excited about returning to Colorado, especially after Jane promised them a big garden where they could plant flowers and watch them grow. "Like the ones we saw at the airport," Evie exclaimed, clapping her hands. Costella nodded eagerly, adding, "And maybe we can put Mr. Buttons and Green Bear near the window so they can see outside." Jane chuckled, amazed at how quickly her daughters were adapting to the idea of a new home and a new mother. When they arrived at Jane's apartment, the girls explored every corner, marveling at the modern furniture and city views. Jane watched them closely, noting how they moved around the space with curiosity rather than fear. They were resilient, just like she'd always imagined they would be. That night, as she tucked them into bed, Evie asked, "Can we call you Mommy yet?" Jane's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected the question so soon, but she nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "If you're ready, I am too," she replied. Both girls grinned, snuggling closer under the blankets. "Good night, Mommy," they said in unison, their voices sweet and sleepy. Jane kissed their foreheads, whispering, "Good night, my angels." In the weeks that followed, Jane focused on creating a stable environment for her daughters. With Robert's support, she began designing plans for rebuilding the family home on the land she'd once considered selling. The team at Colorado Luxury Properties rallied around her, offering resources and connections to make the project happen quickly. "You deserve this," Robert told her one evening as they reviewed blueprints together. "A fresh start for all of you." Jane smiled gratefully, realizing how much she'd come to rely on him, not just as a friend, but as a partner in navigating this new chapter of her life. As the house took shape, so did Jane's relationship with her daughters. Therapy sessions helped them process their feelings about Lucia, Royce, and the life they'd left behind. Evie struggled with anger, often asking why her grandparents had lied to her. Costella, on the other hand, dealt with sadness, missing the routines and luxuries she'd grown accustomed to. Through it all, Jane remained patient, reminding herself that healing was a journey, not a destination. Slowly but surely, the bonds between them grew stronger, rooted in love, honesty, and trust. The day they moved into the newly rebuilt house was bittersweet. Standing in the doorway, Jane felt a surge of memories, both painful and joyful, wash over her. The twins ran ahead, giggling as they explored each room. In the backyard, surrounded by freshly planted flowers and greenery, Jane knelt down beside Evie and Costella. "This is our home now," she said softly. "It's not perfect, and it won't always be easy, but it's ours." Together, the girls hugged her tightly, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. Months later, as snow began to fall on the Victorian-style house, Jane found herself sitting by the fireplace, with Evie and Costella curled up beside her. They were reading a storybook, their favorite stuffed bears resting nearby. Jane glanced at the acrylic keychain hanging from the mantel. Its photo faded, but still precious. She thought about everything they'd endured, the fire, the lies, the separation, and how far they'd come since that fateful Christmas Eve. Life wasn't without its scars, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Looking at her daughters, now thriving and happy, Jane realized that resilience wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about carrying it forward, using it to build something stronger and brighter. Her family had been broken, but they had also been rebuilt with love, patience, and unwavering determination. As the flames danced in the hearth, casting warm light across the room, Jane closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Against all odds, she had found her way back to her children, and nothing, not even the ghosts of the past, could take that away from them.